Good evening, everybody. This is the February 2022 meeting of the Montgomery County Civic Federation. My name is Alan Bowser, president of the Civic Federation. Thanks to all of you who've joined this evening. We've got an exciting program, which we will get to directly after we take care of some Federation business. This meeting is being recorded. Please keep that in mind, and please mute your phones and your mics. The first order of business is the approval of the agenda. The agenda is on page 2 of the newsletter. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting? Is there a second? It's been first and seconded, I think, that we approve the agenda for tonight's meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. The agenda is approved. Second order of business is to approve the minutes from the January 10th meeting. So a motion to approve the minutes of the January 10th meeting. They're on page 23 of the newsletter.
Motion to approve.
A second? It's been seconded by Jackie.
Silently.
Yeah, silently. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's been first and seconded to approve the minutes from the January 10th meeting. All those in favor say aye.
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 Thanks. Thank you very much. The next order of business is the treasurer's report. Jerry Garson, will you give us our treasurer's report, please?
The Montgomery County Civic Federation operates on a fiscal year from July 1st to June 30th. In the last 30 days, we've had $175 worth of dues come in. We had $182 of our post office box, giving us a net loss for the 30 days of $7. And cumulative, we've had $1,150 in dues and expenses of $732, giving us a net income of $417 for the period. And our bank balance is currently $9,406. If there are any questions, let me know.
Thank you very much, Jerry. This is the point in the meeting where we ask our participants if they have any brief announcements they'd like to make for the benefit of the body. Does anybody have announcements they'd like to make? Not seeing any hands raised or any indication that people have announcements. I have several. So following up a discussion at our January meeting, the Civic Federation in a joint letter with the Montgomery County Taxpayers League sent a letter to the State Attorney General asking for an investigation into alleged violations of the Maryland Open Meetings Act and violations of lobbying requirements by MCPS. We sent that letter out on January 27th. In response, we received a letter from Catherine Thompson, the staff counsel from the Maryland State Ethics Commission, who has invited representatives of the Civic Fed to meet with staff of the Ethics Commission to discuss our inquiry. And so we will follow up with that. We also received a letter from Rachel Simonson, who is the counsel to the Open Meetings Compliance Board. And she has suggested that if we have an official complaint about open meetings, that we have to file a complaint with the Open Meetings Compliance Board, and we will follow up on that. Recently, we received an invitation from the Officer of the Comptroller, Peter Francho, inviting us to a meeting or asking if we could meet, if he could meet with us to discuss the economy and the tax filing season that is upcoming. And we will plan a date for an open meeting with the community with Peter Francho and representatives from his office. Also, announcement tomorrow at 1:35, the County Council is going to have a work session. Full council's having a work session on the Thrive document. They're also going to be talking about the downtown Silver Spring land use plan and the 270 quarter program that starts at 1:35 tomorrow. It's available on YouTube and it's available on Facebook. Just a couple other quick announcements. We're coming to the end of our Civic Federation year, and we'll be electing new officers. People would like to be on the nominations committee for new officers. Please email me at allen.bowser@gmail.com. I'll put that in the chat. We also will be having our awards program in June, and we need to constitute an awards committee for our Wayne Goldstein Award, our Sentinel Award, and the Star Cup. You can email me or any of the officers. Finally, just to remind you that the Civic Federation is online on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. So thank you for indulging me in those announcements. Welcome, everybody. This evening, we are going to, we have a distinguished panel who will be discussing the state of education in Montgomery County. And before we get to our distinguished panel, I'm pleased to announce that one of our guests this evening is the president of the Montgomery County Board of Education, Brenda Wolff, who, President Wolff, good evening and welcome. And I hope you have some introductory remarks, and you can then turn it over to the MCPS staff. I would really appreciate that. It's good to see you, Brenda. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alan, and I'm glad to be here. Good evening, everyone. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Brenda Wolff, the president of the Board of Education. And Alan, I want to thank your group for the invitation to speak tonight. The board, you know, we value the diversity of our community. It's the strength of our school system. We represent a diversity of perspectives, all of which enrich what we're trying to do in our school system. The honor of educating students belongs to all of us. Education is a joint venture, and we're grateful for our partnership with the Civic Federation. You know, the pandemic has challenged all of us to think in new ways and to confront old problems with renewed vigor. As you know, it's been a very difficult 2 years. Addressing and mitigating learning loss is our major focus as a school system. The pandemic highlighted and exacerbated existing issues. In order to address these complex issues, we have had to take a multi-pronged approach, and we will talk with you about that today. I'm not going to take up a lot of your time because I know you want to get on to hearing the very valuable information that our group is here to share. So with that, I'll pass the baton to, let's see, who's here? Who do you want to start with?
I'll start, Ms. Wolff.
All right, go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jimmy Dandrea, Chief of Staff for MCPS. Thank you very much for inviting us to participate this evening. We are also joined this evening by Dr. Helen Nixon, the Chief of Human Resources and Development for MCPS, Mr. Everett Davis, Acting Associate Superintendent for the Office of Student and Family Support and Engagement, Ms. Niki Hazel, the Associate Superintendent for the Office of Curriculum and Instructional Programs, Ms. Diane Morris, one of our area Associate Superintendents, Mr. Seth Adams, the Director of Facilities Management, and Ms. Robyn Rosenbauer from our Employee Assistance Program. I don't believe that I forgot anyone. This evening, I'm going to share my screen. We're very excited to be here with you on this Valentine's Day, and we know a lot of different things that may be of interest to you. So for the discussion this evening, we're really going to highlight a few topics, and then we'll open it up to questions that you may have. So we know that there have been a lot of questions in this group and throughout the county around student mental health and well-being, as this has been a really important topic, not just within Montgomery County, but throughout the state and the nation. We do want to take just a couple of minutes to talk about the process we have used to transition individual schools to virtual learning. Then we're going to talk about how we maintain that our buildings are clean and safe in the midst of the pandemic. We will also talk about sustainability. We also know that one really, really important topic is what are we doing to mitigate the learning disruptions that have been caused by the pandemic. So we will share some of the steps that we are taking. And then we will close with a presentation from the Office of Human Resources and Development, specifically around staffing and how we are addressing the challenges presented by staffing shortages. So once again, thank you very much for having us this evening. We look forward to engaging with you. And without further ado, I will now turn it over to Mr. Everett Davis to talk about student mental health and well-being.
Thank you, Mr. Dandrea, and good evening to everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to spend a portion of your Valentine's Day. We again appreciate the invite. Thank you to the Civic Federation and also to Ms. Wolff for including us this evening. And so I just wanted to share a little bit as I go into my portion of the presentation, sharing a little bit with you about student mental health as well as our staff mental health. We'll talk a little bit about that and well-being. That we did have an opportunity to meet with the Board of Education this afternoon. And so before I forget, I would encourage you, if you don't already do so, to please to check out some of the information that we will be sharing here. We also had an opportunity to share in that forum as well. So just to give you a little bit of information and overview where student family support and engagement sits. As Mr. Dandrea said, I do serve as the Acting Associate Superintendent for SFSE, as we call it, also known as Student Services within our system. And I would preface it by sharing that we are experiencing, I don't think it's a secret to anyone, a mental health crisis right now nationwide, which in MCPS we are not immune to. And so what is it that we are doing to make sure that we continue to support the needs, the mental health needs specifically of our students and staff as we continue to navigate this pandemic and this mental health crisis. And so one of the ways that we do so is through the work of our team, the SFSE team. What you see here on the org chart is just a sampling of our entire MCPS org chart. And I'll just walk through it with you quickly. You'll have an opportunity to look at it in more detail. I know that there's a lot of information here, but just wanted to give a little bit of a highlight of what our office does to support the mental health needs and really the well-being, safety and security of our system. And so what you see here in this org chart are the direct reports that are a part of the SFSE team. Again, I've introduced myself. Right below me, you can see that there is a student health coordinator. You might have heard about the vaccination clinics that we've been supporting all around our system. We're up above 22,000 of our students that have been vaccinated, thanks to the efforts of Ms. Izzard, our coordinator, and working very closely with our partners in DHHS. That's just one of her many roles, but she is our coordinator for student health. We also have an instructional specialist, Ms. Odom, who serves as our Be Well 365 instructional specialist. And I won't go into a whole lot of what Be Well 365 is right now because I have a whole slide devoted to that, but just know that she coordinates those efforts of our Be Well 365 initiative. Right below that in the org chart, you can see there are 5 directors listed there, and each of them supports a department or a team within SFSE. To the left, you can see Ms. Jornby supports our student engagement, behavioral management, and academics. She is primarily responsible for our mindfulness, for our restorative justice, for our alternative programs, and for our social workers that we have within SFSE, just to name a few of her main responsibilities and oversight. We have our pupil personnel and attendance services, which, as the name implies, deals with attendance and a chronic absenteeism, providing supports to remove any barriers to our students and families to ensure that our students engage on a regular basis, as well as our pupil personnel workers, or PPWs for short, who support in those efforts of attendance, placement, et cetera. That's where they live within the pupil personnel and attendance realm. Then we have our student well-being and achievement. Dr. Cruz supervises, and this is our counseling. You can see that she supervises not only our counseling, supporting our school-based counselors, but also supports our SEL, or our social emotional learning curriculum. She co-sponsors that with our psychologist, our Department of School Psychology, which I'll talk about in just a moment. Moving to the right, you see our Student Family Services and International Enrollment. Ms. Borcase, our director there, supports our international enrollment when our students first come into the country, into MCPS. One of their first entry points into our system is through our international admissions and enrollment. And so she supervises that team as well as our parent community coordinators, or PCCs for short, who are our teachers. Often refer to them as our home to school liaisons or our teachers for our families, providing them supports. And then to the very right, you can see we have our psychological services. Dr. Conley Chester serves as our support, as our director for that team. And that, as the name implies, our school psychologist, our crisis management, as well as I said, she co-leads along with Dr. Cruz from Student Wellbeing and Achievement, our social emotional learning curriculum, which we do offer to all of our students K through 12. And we're implementing that in a three-year phase. You can go to the next slide, please. So I said I would come back to the Be Well 365 initiative. This is our system-wide initiative for all schools, all students, and all staff. And what you see here listed for that Be Well 365 initiative are the 6 essentials. And each of these 6 essentials falls under 3 main categories. It's our physical, our social, and our psychological well-being. We are interested in all 3 of those. And so these 6 essentials we consider as, again, as the name implies, the essential categories in order to make sure that that physical, social, and psychological well-being needs are met for all of our stakeholders. Again, all students, all staff, and all of our schools. You can go to the next slide. And so being a little bit more specific to bring it down to the local school level, because again, I know we were asked about student, how is it that you promote and support student well-being, safety, and security? And so you can see, you've heard me mention our social emotional learning curriculum, which is, again, system-wide, being implemented in 3 different phases. We do incorporate also our personal body safety lessons for all of our students. We also, as you can see there, we have something called the Parent Academy, which provides supports to our families. They are free sessions, and they deal with topics that will help our families, much as I mentioned those parent community coordinators, to engage with their students in their learning and provide additional supports, including mental health supports. We also have, I wanted to make sure I mentioned our staff as well. And so that EAP that you see there stands for Employee Assistance Program. And we do have a very thriving EAP program. We work very closely in partnership with our team in the Office of Human Resources and Development. And I think you'll hear more about that, because I know I have a colleague on the line who will speak more to that, how we provide mental health and well-being to our staff. And lastly, I want to highlight our Waymaking video series. If you're not familiar with that, that does come out of our team. Dr. Conley Chester, who's our director for school psychology, is a Waymaking video series that really helped us to make our way, as the name implies, through the COVID pandemic. So I would encourage, if you have not seen, jump on our website and you can just type in Waymaking. Several videos for our adults, for our students. They're in English. We've offered them in Spanish. Just would encourage you to check those out if you have not done so previously. We can go to the next slide. So giving additional examples of targeted support for our students, staff, and families. We do have what's called our student well-being teams. And these teams, as the name implies, are responsible at the local level for the well-being of our students. They work together with a combination of local school staff, as well as additional staff, such as our school psychologists, our school counselors, our pupil personnel workers, any of our ESOL staff, our English as speakers of other languages, are providing supports and making sure that this is a problem-solving team that comes together to really look at root causes that may be preventing our students from engaging in learning, for example, through attendance. We also have what's known as the linkages to learning, and also our JESA, or Jewish Social Services Agency. They help to provide wraparound services, including mental health supports, including telehealth supports to our families. So I think it's important, and just want to appreciate these are just a few, but many of our community partners that help us to do this work, because we know we cannot do this work alone, and we do appreciate the community partnerships that we have. Also working in crisis response, I know you have probably heard about some of the more recent crises that we have dealt with, specifically in our Magruder and also our Northwest communities. Our crisis response team has been very supportive in immediate actions, but they also provide supports. What happens a week from the incident? What happens 2 weeks from the incident? Are we continuing to provide supports to our students, to our staff on an ongoing basis? For example, through lessons, through continued supports both in the school and in the community to, again, make sure that our students are able to continue to engage in a safe and a learning environment that definitely helps to enhance their well-being. So just a few of the examples of how we do our targeted support for our students, our staff, and our families. We can go to the next slide, please. If there is ever a concern, I always like to share this information, and this, for our community members that are here, our Maryland Safe Schools tip line, as well as our Montgomery County tip line. Do want to encourage you, if there are concerns, you don't know who to reach out to, any immediate concerns, please share this information with those who are here and others who may not be here within the space. I want to make sure that this information is shared with you. We can go to the next slide. And so one of the Be Well 365 essentials that you heard me mention earlier in the presentation is around restorative justice. Also, you might have heard about mindfulness. And I just wanted to give you an idea as we continue to work through our system and really operationalizing our restorative justice in all of our schools, as well as our mindfulness. They are definitely two of our strategies. I know I mentioned them as essentials, but two strategies that have really been proven over and over again to help to de-escalate our students, helping them to remain focused, to remain in class, and helping them to have an opportunity to really, as I said, to de-escalate and to build community with one another. These are two initiatives that we are continuing, as you can see here, continuing to train our staff in, continuing to work together with our students, a lot of times in a peer opportunity with our students, and also having this built into the school day, where there are opportunities for our students to, as many of them do now, have opportunities to practice mindfulness, whether it be during a class, during lunchtime, after school, also having a designated space, even if it's not in their classroom, to have a mindfulness room, such as a Zen den or a Be Well space, where they can go and practice these mindfulness practices or restorative justice, which do work in tandem. And again, with the goal being that we are de-escalating, giving the students an opportunity to reset, and giving them an opportunity to return back to the classroom where they can focus and, again, engage in learning. We can go to the next slide, please. And so at this time, I'm going to turn the presentation over to my associate colleague, Ms. Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Good evening, everyone. Nice to be with you tonight. My name is Diane Morris. I'm one of the area associate superintendents. And among my responsibilities for the past 18 months, I've led what's been called the design team. And essentially, we've been planning and trying to adjust to the ever-changing landscape around COVID and COVID response. And so it's a multi-stakeholder team, internal team, and it involves all the multiple different union association members. And so we try to get feedback and we try to build out our response plan through that group. And then we take it out to others to figure out what will work best for students, staff, and the community. So one of the things that I wanted to share with you this evening was one of our most recent things that we worked on, and it was a shift to virtual for specific schools. With the Omicron variant, we went into November feeling really positive, feeling like, okay, maybe we're on track and things seem to be settling. And then we saw a spike through that variant, and we really had to decide We knew we didn't want to do a school closure because in different parts of the district, you saw different case rates. We know that there are different vaccination percentages. And so we really wanted to differentiate in terms of if and when we needed to shift to virtual. And so we came up with a process map for what this would look like. And to date, we've had 3 cohorts go through this shift. And so I just wanted to give you an overview of what it entailed. Essentially, we use a number of data points, and the data points are really focused on the operations. What does it take to run a school effectively? And are we able to do that? And so what we were doing is multiple times a week, we were pulling these data points. Among the points that we were reviewing was the student attendance rate over 3 days. Were students attending? Were they not? This didn't necessarily focus on the number of students that had COVID or the reason that they were attending, because what we found was, and we still are finding, although it is decreasing, is that there are students who don't have COVID, but their families are choosing to keep them home because of fear, because perhaps there's someone in the home that they want to be really careful about. So there were a number of different reasons why this was happening. Students were also were not coming to school because they were quarantined. So we wanted to look at the student attendance rate and see how many of the student population was attending and how many were staying home. We also needed to look at staff absences, teachers, building service, food workers, all those people who help run a school. What was the staff in terms of operation? Were they attending? Were they not? Again, over 3-day average. I'm sure that you heard we had a few days there where we had bus routes that were impacted because our operators were not able to come to work due to their own transmission of the virus. And so that impacts really heavily the operations of a school. We also looked at our substitute requests, a 3-day average. So for the staff that were calling out sick, were they able to obtain a sub or not? In some schools, it's easier than in others for whatever reason, depending on where they are in the district, accessibility. We have a lot of teachers who will retire from a school and then commit to subbing in that school or schools nearby. And so that's something that greatly impacted the operations of the school. And then we looked at COVID-19 cases among students and staff for 10 days. So this was the data that we pulled. At least we were pulling it regularly, but decision points were made twice a week to look at which schools were rising to the top. So there was no metrics or there was no percentage that we set for each category. But what we did was we pulled these data points, and then we saw of these data points, which schools are the highest, that are the most impacted. And then a conversation happened to say, does it make sense for us to pursue the shift to virtual? Once we had the conversation internally around which schools, the directors in our office reached out to principals and said, your school rose to the top and is among the list of schools that we want to consider a shift. And then a few steps went into action, which included the principal the following day would pull together a stakeholder team, which included several key members on staff, as well as parent leadership. A representative from DHHS would look at the data, and together they would answer some questions, because as I reviewed the data points for you, they're really fluid. So from any given day, I might be out today because I quarantined, but I might be back tomorrow. And so we really wanted to make sure that the school, the parents, as well as the staff, had an opportunity to really assess the impact on the operations of the school, to either verify what the data was telling us or to provide a counter. And so then the school team that would meet would make a recommendation, and then the announcement would be made for the 10 days for the shift to virtual. And we had plans in place for what that meant for teachers, to ensure that students had technology, which included their laptops as well as Wi-Fi's, and that the teachers' pages on Canvas, which is our electronic platform, were updated so that they had all the necessary information. We also coordinated with our food distribution to ensure that we were still distributing meals to families, even though they were in the virtual space. So I just wanted to highlight for you really quickly what the process has been. Since our cases have improved, we have not had a cohort of schools in our last cohort came back in person on February 11th, and we have not had a new cohort identified because we have been able, and we're so happy. It's been at least 2 weeks now where our bus routes have been running at 100%. And our unfilled vacancies dramatically have gone down in terms of subs picking them up. And so we are trending in the right direction. And so we have this in place should we need to pivot again if another variant appears. But for the most part right now, we are operating safe and students are receiving the services that they need. So at this time, I'm going to turn over the presentation to my colleague, Seth Adams, who will walk us through facilities.
Good evening, everyone. So I will be brief. I wanted an opportunity to talk through the building aspect of what we're doing. So I know there's been lots of questions around how are we keeping the buildings clean and safe for our students and staff. And a few of the areas of focus for us have really been on indoor air quality as well as our cleaning methodology. The indoor air quality piece has been huge from a perspective of change for us. We've focused on two things, one being increasing ventilation as well as improving the efficiency of our air filters. So within every one of our classrooms, we have looked at measures of both air exchanges in spaces as well as looking at the filtration that occurs. And in many cases, we've installed air cleaners in our classrooms. We have close to 7,000 air cleaners in our classrooms now, which are essentially devices that just help clean the air within each space. We're starting to do CO2 monitor. You may see that on the news here and there, but really what that is it's a measurement of how well your systems are working and how well is the air essentially being safe in each of the spaces. So as we build that out, we are working with our PTA groups. We have a lot of expertise in this county. We have folks from working through NIST all the way through other major organizations of this country that we've really leaned on to help guide as well as communicate with parents along the way. The other part of it is cleaning. There's a piece where I think when the pandemic initially started, there was this thought that there's this approach that the surfaces were an area of focus, and they still are for us. We still have we've changed all of our processes to focus on high touch points. But one area is this idea of electrostatic cleaning. And for us, disinfecting a building used to take a significant amount of people power as well as time. With the new technology, we're able to disinfect after all students and staff leave within a matter of hours. So every building, every day goes through this disinfection process. But I would say one of the really good things that has come out of this for us is this, we've had a focus on our cleaning chemicals products. And again, we've really worked with our PTAs as well as local universities to go towards a much more green cleaning plan. We had a green clean plan before, but this is one that's definitely moving in a much safer direction for all those involved. As well as we've really started to work with experts around how to maximize outdoor time. I think there was a question that just popped up around eating outdoors, taking advantage of outdoor learning. We've worked with our schools, we've worked with other partners to look for opportunities to be able to maximize that, particularly when you think about elementary schools and their cafeteria and recess operations. So from a building perspective, we've essentially retooled all of our operations. We now have preventative maintenance teams that focus solely on this. They go to schools every week to make sure that the work is being done. And we feel like we're in a really good place, not only from a pandemic perspective, but also as we continue beyond to establish these processes that will remain in place for many years to come, if not as codes change. So with that, I'm going to move to the next slide, and I'm going to change gears a little bit. I think there were some questions around sustainability, and within our area, we have to look to the future as well. You know, we're obviously working with our systems to maintain a safe environment. But we also have to think about, you know, what our schools will look like next year and 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road. So one area that I did want to just briefly touch upon is our sustainability approach. The Board of Education is going through a policy change. You know, as MCPS, we've always had a focus on sustainability, but as we're transitioning into a new policy, we are looking at some major changes throughout the school district to really transform the culture of everything we do, from not only the academic education side to obviously, you know, the operations. So we're looking at, you know, curriculum, we're looking at professional development, we're looking for ways to engage students. And within this policy approach, it is something that will ultimately be embedded in every aspect of what we do. And we are very much trying to align ourselves with the County Climate Action Plan. So we have made recommendations, and it's out for public comment. I'll get to that part in a second. But to align our school system operations and goals and measures with that of the County Climate Action Plan, which is really an aggressive approach to reduce greenhouse gas emissions over the course of the next several years. Next slide, please. So some of the things that are going to be part of our policy work is really to, again, look at our use of technology, you know, to understand how we use our energy. What we know from an energy consumption standpoint, transportation and buildings are the biggest users. Our transportation fleet is transitioning to an all-electric fleet as we speak. And from a building perspective, we are doing everything from aggressive solar installations to pursuing net zero opportunities in our newer buildings, and then obviously looking at some of our existing fleet and looking for ways to improve you know, all aspects of our building usage. But a big part of this work is going to be behavior based. And what we do know is that, you know, teaching our students, teaching our communities is going to be key in this work as we move forward. So I really hope that you know, this group can be a part of this work with us, hand in hand, as we move forward to educate ourselves and those around us, but particularly focusing on our students. Next slide. So just from a timeline perspective, you know, the policy changes have gone to the board. We're currently in a public comment period. In April, we will come back from a policy management committee review and bring those comments to the board and hopefully look for final action in May to really jumpstart our sustainability work as we move into future fiscal years. So again, I know this is a little bit of a segue from our work or discussion around the COVID response today, but I felt it was really important to highlight some of our sustainability work as we're navigating the current challenges. So with that, we'll transition to the next slide and turn it over to
Niki Hazel.
Niki.
Yep. Hi there, everyone. Good to be here. Niki Hazel. I'm the Associate Superintendent for Curriculum and Instructional Programs. And I'm just gonna touch very briefly on our overall plan for how we are mitigating the learning disruptions that occurred as a result of the pandemic, and then just highlight one area in particular. All of our schools are expected to develop a school improvement plan based on their academic data and also the data of students around social emotional needs. And all plans involve setting goals for literacy and mathematics, making sure that students are performing at or above grade level. And so every school has a detailed plan that is outlined in the action steps they're going to take to get there. And then within our literacy and mathematics focus, our curriculum team works very closely with schools and with other offices here to make sure that they're well trained and that they have the materials and resources that they need to be able to implement instruction effectively. We are really pushing very hard this idea of assessment of and for learning. Essentially, that means that we look at the assessments to determine overall how our schools are doing, kind of big picture. And then we also want to have teachers looking at those very informal assessments, those day-to-day checks that will give them the information they need to move their students forward the next day. So it's really those informal ways teachers can check for understanding so that they know what to teach the following day. We also have been studying a lot of research around this idea of accelerating the learning. Even though students were in a pandemic, even though there were a significant amount of disruptions, we can't get into this idea that we need to remediate all of our students because they will have a very difficult time catching up. And so moving along with the grade level instruction and putting in time to go back and fill in those gaps is really what we're training our teachers to be able to do. The next area is tutoring and intervention, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. And then professional learning. We've been just working with our staff. Many of them are learning new curriculum, and so just providing them that training. If you go to the next slide, please. We did have, obviously, it wasn't just last school year that was a bit disruptive, but this school year as well, we've experienced a lot with the continuation of the pandemic. And so we have really been trying to figure out other ways to support students outside of the school day, and also through the support of funds that we have received from the Maryland State Department of Education. So we've received additional funding to provide tutoring services for students. We call it high dosage tutoring. It's the term that's being used around the country as an evidence-based way of really getting kids back on track. So high dosage tutoring is tutoring provided to students 2 or 3 times a week around the content that they're learning in school. And we are offering that for our students before or after school through their teachers or paraeducators. And we also have for students who need more intensive support, evidence-based interventions. Those are interventions that we approve, purchase, and train staff to use. And there's a list here with those bulleted items. Those are just names of some of the interventions that we use with our students, and we track their progress. They're not intended for students to be in all year, but really we want to make sure that they have a plan so that we could target their supports and get them out and back into that grade level instruction. And then we also have something newer. We're calling it the on-demand tutoring homework help. And that is, we have 2 contracts with vendors who provide online tutoring for students. Any student in the school district can register in entering their ID, and they can have a tutor who will appear to assist them. One service provides just math and literacy, and the other service provides tutoring in just about any content area you can think of. I looked up Chinese tutoring and there was someone available. So they have it in lots of different content areas. And so these are just some ways that we are trying to support our students outside of their instructional day. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Nixon.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Helen Nixon. I'm the Chief of Human Resources and Development. Happy to be with you this evening. So I'm going to provide the team on this call a couple of updates around some of the strategic initiatives that we have going on in the Office of Human Resources, specifically around staffing. I know that for the purposes of this evening, there was particular energy around what are we doing around staffing and of course, substitute teachers. So during the course of the year, we've had a laser-like focus on building and enhancing relationships with our colleges and our university partners, both locally and nationally. And our team in certification and staffing has returned to in-person recruitment events. Well, during pandemic, we did everything virtually. And we did find that not having the opportunity to be face-to-face, not being able to go to job fairs and colleges and universities to do the face-to-face meet and greets with potential future candidates put us at a disadvantage. And so we were very happy that the team on the recruiting side is able to be in person this year and traveling. So we're pretty excited about that. When developing the strategic recruitment plan, we were intentional in selecting events and colleges and universities that would increase the number of diverse candidates in our critical shortage areas. So we have built partnerships with historically Black colleges and universities, minority serving institutions, and colleges and universities that have high enrollment of Latinx teachers or future teachers in their teacher prep programs. It is a very competitive recruiting landscape, and data and analytics are critically important. So we are deliberate in our approach to attract and recruit and hire the best candidates. And we have learned that when implementing our before, during, and after recruiting strategy, coupled with our ACE programs and experience with open contracts, it gives us a greater opportunity to get our brand out there and to make sure that when these student teachers have an opportunity to make decisions about their careers, that they make that decision and come to Montgomery County Public Schools. We really do invest in our whole employee value proposition. So we have a pretty a small but mighty 2-person recruiting team, but we're really proud of that group. They're on the road just about every day. Very rarely are they in the office. They're doing pop-up shops, they're traveling, and they're on campuses. They have had contact with over 1,600 potential candidates. We're going into the spring season where we know we're going to have May graduation. So we're going to be open contracting brand new teachers very, very shortly. Next slide, please, Jimmy. I just want to make sure that I'm making sure that I'm staying on track. And next slide, please. Okay. Okay, and then next slide. Perfect. So as we were talking about what we are doing to recruit teachers, oh no, but back one, please, sorry. Back to the substitutes. I'll just keep talking here. So substitute teachers has been something that has been at the top of mind as well. Oh, I see. Okay, Jimmy. All right. Yeah. So with our substitute teachers, we do job fairs twice a month. We have, since the start of the year, had, as you can see here, over 1,200 applicants. We've hired over 500 substitute teachers. We do hire at our job fairs face-to-face, and we do interviewing in the office as well. We have been able to work successfully with MCEA, our teacher union partners, and with our Office of Labor Relations to be able to offer more competitive salaries, more competitive hourly wages to our substitute teachers, which we know we needed to do to be able to increase the commitment of the subs that we were meeting. Ms. Morris, in her comments earlier in the start of this program, was talking about how critically important it was to have substitutes to fill for teachers who were either battling COVID themselves or had family members who were. most especially during that time of the year when we had just returned back from the winter break, and the Omicron variant was at its peak, and that was very distressing to us because it left us vulnerable in terms of trying to fill these positions at such a high rate. What we are very grateful for, however, is as the variant has subsided, what we have seen is that our fill rate is climbing back up to a more, what I would call number that is more reminiscent of what it would be on a regular day. So I know this number is going to sound really high, but when you consider we have 15,000 teachers, it's not unusual to have between 600 and 800 people out a day for various forms of leave, personal leave, professional leave, illness and family. So there's any variety of leave that our teachers may need to access. And so our substitute system is usually pretty great about getting those positions filled. We, like everyone else in our neighboring districts, were struggling for a while there, but we are starting to build up our supply again. We have well over 3,000 subs in our pools now. So we are hoping that we have really kind of turned that corner. And again, we're grateful for the collaboration with our union partners and labor relations. On a previous slide, I think I might have just in terms of talking about recruitment, I did just want to share one more thing with the team here. We have invested in a Grow Your Own program where we are very interested in looking at the teachers that we could have in our system who actually were our former students. And so we have a coordinator of future initiatives, and through our Grow Your Own efforts, we really are looking at how we can build our own pathways, get our middle schoolers and our high school students interested in not only a career in teaching, but also thinking about coming back to work for Montgomery County Public Schools in any capacity. In our capacity of central services, in the capacity of paraeducator, building services, cafeteria services. We are a very significant employer in Montgomery County. And we know that having touch points with our own students and making them aware of the fact that we are a viable and vibrant employer, our Grow Your Own programs are looking at ways where we can establish those pipelines. And as I alluded to earlier in the final bullet on this Grow Your Own slide, it's very critical that we maintain our partnership with MCEA, because we know that we have a lot of work to do in terms of kind of retooling and rewriting the narrative on the teaching profession. Teaching is a very difficult job. We've heard a lot in the media about teacher burnout and teachers leaving the profession. The critical shortage areas are real for us too. Our university partners have shared with us that there's a 35 and in some instances a 45% decline in undergraduates who are selecting teacher prep as their major. So we have a lot of work to do to really kind of flip the script on why teaching is such a great profession and why we need great teachers to be in our classrooms in Montgomery County Public Schools, most especially. So we're excited about some of the work that's happening with the blueprint that's going to allow us to incentivize teachers to earn their national board certification. It's tied to a raise, it's tied to a stipend. Moreover, there's a push to make sure that the starting salary for teachers by the year 2026 is up to $60,000 a year for a bachelor's step one, slightly more for a master's step one. So we know that in order to invest in that, we want to invest in our own kids and ask them to come back and teach and or work for us. So we're really excited about the Grow Your Own program. I mentioned the substitute teachers. Next slide, and then I guess the next slide too, because I think I flipped these two, so I apologize for that, Jimmy. And next slide, I think is. So that I think that's it for me then. We did the strategic recruitment, the grow your own, and the substitutes.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Nixon. And
Okay.
thank you to all the staff who presented this evening. I know that everyone just received a tremendous amount of information in the past 45 minutes or so, but we really wanted to provide some important information related to some key areas of focus for the school system. And so with that, I will now turn things back over to you, Mr. Bowser, for questions and answers.
Well, many thanks to the staff for a very comprehensive tour of the horizon of important issues. I know we have lots of questions. I know I've got 8 here on my list, and we'll go around the horn, let people ask questions, but I just wanted to start with this. We ask a lot of our teachers, and God bless every one of them for what they do every day. And Ms. Nixon, you just mentioned an issue that I was curious about, which was, do we pay our teachers enough? Are we competitive with neighboring jurisdictions? I know we're not competitive when it comes to Montgomery County Police Department. I was wondering how it is with MCPS. That's sort of the first question, how we compete with pay for MCPS teachers. And then the second question is related to that, and that has to deal with housing affordability. We've heard through a lot of our discussions over the course of the last several months is that there's not enough affordable housing in Montgomery County, and that some of our first responders and teachers have to live pretty far away from the district. And I'm wondering if how high a strategic priority is that to raise salaries and to do something about housing, and have you been in any kind of useful conversations with county government about what you can do to pay teachers more and to provide affordable housing, which doesn't require them to drive 3 or 4 hours to get to work? I don't know who would answer that, but
I can start, certainly, Mr. Bowser. So yes, our salaries are competitive, and with the, and if you haven't had a chance to, if you weren't able to watch the board meeting earlier today, our new Maryland Blueprint Coordinator did a really great job presenting an overview of what the Maryland Blueprint is really going to do in terms of helping to kind of write that whole question that you have in terms of, are we paying our teachers enough? Because the blueprint, has a commitment, and one that we are on track in Montgomery County Public Schools for meeting, of having that starting salary be at $60,000, which would put us as one of the leaders in terms of starting salaries in this area. So we are competitive, and we will continue to be competitive. And we also offer tuition reimbursement, which not all of our neighboring districts necessarily offer their teachers. So we help our teachers earn their master's degrees and have a robust tuition reimbursement program. And when we talk about a total compensation package, we also have excellent benefits for our employees as well. In terms of the housing, one of the, I guess I will call new responsibilities that I have inherited in my role as Chief of Human Resources, our new superintendent, Dr. Monifa McKnight, had recommended me for appointment to be a board member on the WorkSource Montgomery. So I've just started with that, and I've gotten to meet several colleagues from county council, and I'm also the chair of one of the committees for workforce recovery. And so I've started having those conversations about the housing question that you raise. I think there are many people who are interested in trying to solve that, to see what we can do. So what I would say to you is, I'm kind of in the beginning of those conversations in this new role that I have, and I'm able to be in a space where we can have these conversations with, I think, people that have influence over those kinds of things. That's something that weighs on us. We've heard we hear it at new educator orientation from our brand new teachers about what it does cost to pay a rent or to pay for a mortgage. So that's something that's very important to us and to our superintendent and to our board. And so with that, those are conversations, I think, with some of these new responsibilities that I have that we are going to explore. And I'll just end with this, and anyone else who would like to also chime in. We are constantly looking for ways when we are recruiting to be able to say, no, to your question, Mr. Unger, there's no housing help that we can offer right now. But we would love to be able to say when we are on the road recruiting that we have these opportunities for this for some kind of housing benefit. That is an interest of ours, yes.
Thank you, Dr. Nixon. If I can just chime in, Mr. Bowser, when you hear staff members refer to the blueprint, I just wanted to share a little bit more about what that is. That's our shorthand notation for the Blueprint for Maryland's Future, which was a piece of legislation, as many of you may know, that was passed last year that provides a significant amount of additional funding for local school systems and also has significant additional requirements for local school systems, all designed to enhance and improve education throughout the state of Maryland. And there's really 5 key areas that are in that legislation. Early childhood education is a focus, high quality and diverse teachers and leaders is a focus, college and career readiness is a focus, more resources overall to ensure that all students are successful, and then governance and accountability. So when you hear us refer to Blueprint, that in the presentation that Dr. Nixon referred to today, that's available on the Board of Education website, it's all related to that piece of legislation, which has significant impacts on the work that we do as a school system, and assuming that funding continues in the coming years, will have very significant impacts on education in the state of Maryland moving forward.
Thank you, Jimmy. Jimmy, you can refer to me as Alan. I respond to that. We've got 2 people raised their hands, Jerry Garson and Lorna. So Jerry Garson, you go first. Everybody else, if you'd like to raise a question, you can wave your hand wildly, or you can use the raise your hand function, which is found under the reactions icon at the bottom of the page. Jerry Garson.
In Montgomery County, we have problems reopening schools after minor snowstorms. Is it possible for some of the Montgomery County school bus drivers can be trained over the summer to operate snow plows and take snow and salt trucks, and be paid for the additional time it would take for training these people? So that on days when the schools are closed, but the snow is still on the ground, the school bus drivers can then help reopen the streets so the schools can faster reopen.
Mr. Adams, you want to talk a little bit about our processes for snow removal? Thank you for that question.
Seth, it's on you.
Sure, I love talking about snow removal. Yes, snow removal and obviously, the number one goal in any decision is to make sure students and staff are safe. So one of the things that we have struggled with, not only MCPS, but the county, you heard Diane talk about some of the staff shortages. Unfortunately, some of the snow events occurred right when we were having some of these staff shortages. So not only the county DOT, but MCPS maintenance and building services was really struggling to keep up, even though some of these storms were pretty minor in the grand scheme of things. But what I would say is the process is to, for us, we monitor these storms, and we have a set of teams that plows, and we have a set of teams that handle sidewalks on the school grounds. But one of the most the largest factor in the decision making is just understanding what the local roads look like. Understanding what the county DOT teams are able to accomplish in the neighborhoods, what the main roads look like, and just make a decision on making sure, again, our students can remain safe. I would say these storms that occurred this year were a little unique as opposed to some of the years in the past. They did happen. The snow came down during the hours of commuting, which obviously makes it that much more difficult. We can't plow our lots once staff are parked in the lots. Just makes it really difficult. So I know some of the decisions you probably were scratching your head about, but we definitely were working with some additional constraints this year that normally we have not experienced. So that may not answer your question, but we are obviously looking at a variety of ways to keep up with this, including hiring contractors if need be. We have both the county as well as MCPS has a fleet of contractors that we can deploy should storms prove to be more difficult to manage than our teams can handle.
Thank you, Seth. Lorna Ford.
Good evening. Thank you for such a comprehensive presentation this evening. And I apologize if I'm going to ask a question that has already been answered, because in this world of Zoom, I had to jump from one Zoom to this one. So forgive me if it's already been answered, just say we already answered that. But I just have a couple of questions. The first, I think it's commendable that the plan that was described calls for raising teacher salaries to $60K, but we know that that's still woefully short of what's needed for anyone to afford to live in Montgomery County. That will still cause many of our teachers to have to go to neighboring counties and be unable to live where they work. So it's commendable, it's a good start, but it still falls short of what's needed. Is there a plan to look at substitute salaries? Because I understand that there was a tremendous shortage, and if you already addressed substitute salaries and a plan to try to beef those up, just nod your head and I'll keep moving.
We did.
Okay,
It's
thank
just,
you.
yeah, we just did.
Okay, sorry. Okay, the other question I have is about the mental health professionals. That really, it's obvious that is a critical need in our schools, and during the discussions that we had around the county regarding the SROs and removing them and reallocating funds, mental health professionals was a priority. Are we on track with that? Do we have a shortage of mental health professionals, or are they staffed where we intended them or want them to be staffed?
Ms. Ford, I can address that. I did put a comment in the chat, so I can just summarize for you. We are experiencing a supply shortage, not unlike nationwide, of mental health professionals. And so what we've had to do is to look creatively at how is it that we can use our existing resources as well as innovative resolutions, such as I just gave an example. Can we move some of our 10-month psychologists, school psychologists, for example, to 12 months? Because we know that when school is out, that doesn't mean that the mental health needs go away. Can we also look at telehealth supports, for example? Is that another option to meet our students and families where they are? So you might not have heard the beginning, but I just suggested today we had an opportunity to share during our Board of Education meeting, to share some of those thoughts, innovative ways that we can address this mental health crisis. So if you have an opportunity, I would just highly suggest that you check that out.
I most certainly will. And then my last question, still pertaining to mental health, have we considered collaborating with Montgomery College or USG to create a pipeline of mental health professionals to encourage students in that particular field to come on as interns or whatever it is that we call them these days? I know once upon a time you had student teachers come on and train to be teachers. But since there's this critical need in this particular field, have we thought about collaborating with our local educational institutions to try to create a pipeline?
And the answer is yes. I can let Dr. Nixon go ahead. I'm sorry.
So no, that's okay, Everett. I was just going to say, so we are in process now for hiring our guidance counselors. We're also in process for hiring more psychologists. But you hit the nail on the head when you said there is a shortage, and it's a shortage that exists nationwide. And so we are competing with neighboring states and neighboring districts. We're working collaboratively with our union partners. We're looking at opportunities to make 10-month employees, possibly 12-month employees. We're in the works currently trying to do that. And we are also working with, Robyn, please feel free to come off mute and also talk about the way EAP collaborates, but I just want the team on the call to know that we are recruiting for mental health professionals. We are looking at ways to partner with the universities for the internship programs. And we were having interviews today for the mental health supervisor, the supervisor position, to be able to hire actually more behavioral specialists as well. So the short answer is yes. Our recruiting team is working on all of those things, cross-office collaboration for that as well. Robyn Rosenbauer, would you like to share anything from the EAP perspective?
Sure. I'll just quickly say that we were very excited this year to receive 2 new positions to the EAP. And these are wellness coordinators that are providing support to staff. And in addition to which, we strive to augment our staff, because we do only have 2 clinical specialists, with interns, graduate level interns from University of Maryland and Catholic University. And so we go from 2 to 4 counselors, and they are able to provide counseling just like we do under supervision.
Thank you, Robyn. Everett, did you want to add anything else?
No, thank you. I submitted comments in the chat also, but I appreciate that.
We've
you.
got,
I can just,
go ahead,
I
Jimmy.
just wanted to mention briefly, there's been a tremendous amount of work. I know there's been questions about a lot of different positions in terms of compensation. There's been a tremendous amount of work over the course of this year to really look at compensation across a variety of job positions, not just for teachers and substitutes, which are among the highest in the region, but across the board, because we know that we're in a very different place than we were prior to the pandemic in terms of what it looks like to be able to hire for a variety of positions. And so the and development has worked very hard to make sure that our compensation is competitive, if not among the highest in the state and region.
Thank you, Jimmy. We've got 3 people raising their hands. I ask you guys to make your questions short. Carrie Lamari, you're next.
I've got a couple of questions, actually. The first one, I heard you speak about accelerated learning and on-demand tutoring. Many of our kids probably won't adapt well with the accelerated learning program, I don't think. I'm not talking about, there's a percentage that will have difficulty accelerating their ability to learn. On-demand tutoring sounds very interesting, and I'd like to know a little more about that. How do you plan to apply it? Do parents know about this service? And what does it encompass? My second question, if you want to hear it, is more about, it deals with security. What are we doing in our schools? I mean, we got rid of the SROs, and we saw what happened with Magruder. I see a relationship with security and students' activity. I mean, because of the pandemic, I wonder if the children have been actively engaged. Sometimes extracurricular activity outside of the school setting, so to speak, that helps with children. That helps with their social well-being. If you could explain those couple of things to me, I sure would appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. Anybody want to step up on accelerated learning? That's right in your wheelhouse.
Yeah. Yes, actually, if we could answer the last question first so that I can turn off my Just go in and if you don't mind answering the last question first, and then I'll come back.
So that was on community engagement officers as opposed to school resource officers. I know there's been a couple of county council hearings and a lot of interest in that subject across the population of the counties. Anybody want to speak to your sort of current thinking about what was it called? Community engagement officers version 2.0?
Right, and activities, Alan, and extra curricular activities for these kids.
All right, well, let's get one answer first. Anybody have anything to do about community engagement officers 2.0?
Yes, I can share a little bit about the Community Engagement Officer Program. So I noted briefly in the chat, just kind of an overview. The school resource officer program was eliminated at the end of the 2021 school year. And in its place, as established by the county executive, is the community engagement officer or CEO program. The most significant difference between the programs is that previously SROs or school resource officers were stationed primarily at high schools and were interacting with students throughout the day in the different high schools. With the CEO program, the officers were not in the schools, but were deployed to schools when there was a need for a police response based on the memorandum of understanding between the school system and all of the law enforcement agencies in Montgomery County. As a result of ongoing evaluation of the program, which we had said from the beginning that we would be doing, we are working collaboratively now with a variety of stakeholders to make some adjustments to the program. And so there were some proposals that were shared with the Board of Education and the County Council last week that involved the community engagement officers being more engaged at all schools throughout the county, not just with the high schools. It is very important to note it is not the return of school resource officers. So with the community engagement officers, some of the things that were discussed in the proposal with the Board of Education and the County Council were, for example, these officers would be engaged and connect with all the schools in various clusters to be able to build relationships with those schools and provide support in various ways, which may include, for example, at an elementary school, going in and serving as a guest speaker, maybe being at a middle school at a time when there was a challenge with traffic, and then coming to a high school potentially, maybe during a period of open lunch when there are a lot of students outside and interacting and going a variety of different places. So at the end of the day, the CEO program, we're continuing to evaluate and make adjustments to that. And we're definitely happy to, talk more about that. But I know that just in the interest of time, that's kind of a very brief overview.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Well, can you repeat the question about extracurricular activities? I apologize.
Well, I mean, it goes hand in hand. When children are locked up in their home and don't have the ability to get out, sometimes they get into mischief. Our schools, playing ball, for example, basketball, football, interacting with each other. What kind of activities are we giving our children today that's helping them take their mind off the pandemic?
That's an excellent question. And we recognize that students who are engaged in extracurricular activities, ultimately, there's research showing that are often more engaged. The students are more engaged in the classroom and often achieve better outcomes. And so when you look across the board at our 209 schools, all of our schools offer some sort of extracurricular activity program. Obviously, that varies significantly by level. Many of the high schools have a very large number of clubs and sports and other extracurricular activities that students can get involved with during lunch or after school hours. At the middle school, many middle schools have specific programs to provide clubs and activities to students after school. And at the elementary level, in many cases, there are programs available, and also in some cases at the middle school through partnerships with various community organizations to offer enrichment as well as extracurricular activity students to participate in. So what I would encourage you to do is if you have specific questions about individual schools, to go to that school's website to get information about the activities they are involved in or that they have available. And if there are questions, my information is on the MCPS website, and you can always feel free to reach out to me and I can help direct the question to the most appropriate person.
Thanks, Jimmy.
How about the first question?
Yeah, this is Niki.
Acceleration of learning.
Acceleration learning and the on-demand tutoring. How is that getting out to the parents?
Sure. And I apologize for having to step away. Acceleration of learning, again, is not acceleration or in the way that we typically think about it as in gifted learning. This is around making sure that we are not just staying stuck in remediation, because students did miss a lot of content last year in virtual space. This is about making sure that we are teaching the grade level standards, even though there may be some gaps in learning, that we are continuing forward and filling in those gaps as we go. And so we're working with teachers, building in the time, helping them with their planning to determine how that should be done for each of the subject areas that they have at school. So it's really about teachers meeting the needs of students and keeping them as close to grade level content as possible. As it relates to the on-demand tutoring, that is available for any student We have been posting things on websites, sending things through social media. We've been sending information home to families. We've been sending information to all of our community partners to share with their constituents. So we've been sharing a lot of that in a variety of ways to get students registered. We see an increase on a regular basis. And then we have several thousand students who are involved in tutoring and intervention with their teachers after school or before school as well.
Thank you.
Bailey Condrey.
Hi, I have two short questions. What do you pay a substitute teacher on a daily basis, and do you manage them as contractors or employees? And the second question is, in schools where you have serious HVAC challenges, what additional hoops do you have to jump through in order to get their air quality where you want it?
So substitute teachers are, it depends if they're a short-term or a long-term sub. Some teachers who register with us might in one quarter work 3 days. So they'll get paid for the 3 days. They don't get benefits. Think about it more as a temporary part-time, if you will. But you get paid for what you work. And some substitute teachers take 3-month assignments. Some people take 2-day assignments. Just depends.
So what's the pay rate for them?
It depends on long-term, if they're long-term or short-term, or if they're retirees.
I understand, but you're hedging on what you pay them.
I'm not hedging. I can drop the rates in the chat. How about that?
All right, excellent, thank you. And then the HVAC question about air quality during the coronavirus.
Sure. So one of the first things we did was we went out and assessed the each building, each system to understand its capability, and we posted that on the website and obviously showed what approach steps we were taking to ensure indoor air quality in those schools. So there are schools that we have challenging systems, and for those schools we've added additional air cleaners. We've obviously focused on filtration. We've looked for ways to increase ventilation where we can, but that hasn't always been the case. And we've also implemented more frequent and routine monitoring of conditions in those schools. So we have everything from energy management to staff that go into those buildings to ensure the systems are operating as they should.
So Seth, I just want to follow up because beyond the HVAC and moving the air around, we often see reports about deteriorating facilities throughout MCPS, schools that have problems with roofs, schools that have problems with water, schools that have problems with rodents. I'm sure that all of those programs are receiving as much attention as they did before, but is this still a priority, and have you had to make any trade-offs as you invest more money in the HVAC issue?
That's a great question, and actually we've along the lines of indoor air quality, we've spent significant time and money on our water quality. I mean, that was part that I didn't mention, but we're doing everything from lead testing to a robust flushing system or flushing protocol in each of our schools. We're installing, the board was able to approve and obtain funding for water bottle filling stations throughout our schools. So we're in the process of installing those. But I would say, things like our pest management program, no, we have not minimized those approaches. What we have scaled back on are some of the nice to have. So, we don't do, we don't have such a high focus on super shiny floors anymore. We don't go into our gyms and do refinishing of gyms every year. We're tennis courts, those sorts of things. We're shifting our funds to focus on the areas that you actually highlighted that are most important. And as we go through our CIP, roof replacements, HVAC replacements, some of those, what we call PLR, which is our planned life cycle replacements, everything from windows, doors, that we're continuing to look for additional funds there and advocating to the county council for more funds in those areas. Because as you mentioned, it is an incredibly high focus area for us.
Yes, please let us know how we can advocate for you. Julie Yang, you've got a question.
Yes, thank you, Alan. So I want to go back to about the mental health piece. So I understand MCPS is hiring more, trying to hire more psychologists and social workers. So I want to know the funding for these additional positions from the CARE Act money. So when the CARE Act money runs out, do we have a plan to where to secure funding, or has that process already started to maintain these positions for the future classes service? Thank you.
I can respond to that, and then anybody else can jump in if they would like to. So for positions that we are funding using federal relief funds, we know that those funds are limited and expire at various times going all the way through fiscal year 2024. And so as a result, we are working each year as we develop our budget to be able to transition positions to our operating budget, because at the end of the day, we know that as we add these positions, specifically around mental health support, we want to make sure that those can be sustained in the long term. So they're initially funded through grant funding, primarily through the federal relief funds, but we are developing plans and have already started that process with the recommended fiscal year 2023 operating budget to transition positions over to the operating budget.
I understand you're coming off a long board meeting, so we won't keep you too much longer, but there was one question I wanted to ask. And then Jimmy, I hope if we have any questions that develop after the call that we can email them to you and maybe get some kind of response to those questions.
Absolutely. I'll put my email address in the chat.
One of the questions that has been troubling me for the last many years is the digital divide between some households that have access to the internet and some that don't. When I was working for the county council, there was a big Kennedy cluster project about connectivity. And I'm wondering, over the course of the last decade, over the course of the last year, how you've addressed the question of internet connectivity for underserved neighborhoods when it comes to connectivity.
That's an excellent question. I will start that and anybody else can jump in as well. So we've made a very significant investment in providing what are referred to as, some of you may know, as MiFi devices to families. Obviously, that was especially critical during the pandemic when we were fully virtual. And we recognize that continues to be very important because we want all of our students and families to have internet access at home. We have worked to make sure that all of our students do have Chromebooks. So we transitioned prior to the pandemic from having Chromebooks available to students in their classes to a model of where every student has their own Chromebook. And then we've also worked collaboratively with schools who are then working with individual families to make sure that they have the ability to access the internet. And that's especially important now, even though we are back in school in person. We do have some students who participate in our virtual academy. And as some of you may be aware, earlier this month, the Board of Education approved a resolution so that for the remainder of this year, if we do have additional snow days, there will be the option to transition to virtual learning for that day. And obviously that requires that everybody be connected. And so our Office of Technology and Innovation has a variety of processes in place to be able to work with schools and with families directly to make sure that they have the technology access that they need.
Well, thank you so much, Jimmy. And thank you to the rest of the MCPS staff who was able to join us. And many, many thanks to Board President Brenda Wolff for facilitating this presentation to the Montgomery County Civic Federation. We really appreciate it and look forward to following up with you about other issues that we care a lot about, like pedestrian safety around schools and safe and healthy playing fields, artificial turf. We have lots of questions to ask, and we will ask them at another time. So thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening. Yes.
This help before you, I tried to put the little chart in the chat, and the formatting does not come out right. So can I just email you the rates for the subs that one of your colleagues asked for so that you can send it out in an email to your folks?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr.
I'll send it to Mr. Dandrea and he can forward it to you, and then you can send it so that you can see the increased rates for the subs, and it will highlight the daily rate for the long term, the short term, and anyone past 45 days.
I'm sure
Actually, he sent us that memorandum already, so we do have that in the chat.
Oh, perfect.
The full memorandum.
Sure,
I've already downloaded.
Sure, Mr. Condrey appreciates that. So
Oh,
thank-
great, great, great. Because I was trying to put it in I was trying to cut and paste it in the chat and the formatting was not coming out right. So whoever sent that, thanks.
So
Is
thanks
that you,
all.
Jimmy?
So thanks all of you for participating on this Valentine's Day. We really, really appreciate it. Some of us are going to have to stay here and continue with our meeting. But thank you so much, President Wolff and everybody else who joined us this evening. We appreciate what you do every day. Thank you so much. Okay, Civic Fed people, we'll continue with our meeting. I hope you found that discussion interesting and useful, and we can follow up with their MCPS Chief of Staff. What we do next is we have our committee reports and of our various committees. I know that we probably have the most interest in the land use and planning and Thrive related conversation, but our first committee, I believe alphabetically, was education. Does anybody have anything else they want to say about education after the conversation we just had with the MCPS board president and staff members? I didn't think so.
Do you want to handle synthetic turf, MCPS synthetic turf in the education discussion or environment?
We're going to do it in environment, which is next. So who's got something to offer on environment?
So for environment, the Walt Whitman High School plastic field has already gone into failure. It is only 3 years old. Apparently, the infill, which on this particular field, I think is the zeolite, is causing drainage issues in the field. It will not drain, so they're going to have to remove all of the zeolite, which is an incredibly energy intensive, labor intensive process. And then they're going to figure out what they're going to put in as an alternative infill. But it's probably going to take the field out of play for 2 to 3 months.
I saw that Amanda Farber had highlighted that for people. But we are supporting chain of custody legislation in the county, in the state assembly. So hopefully that will go forward. And would have been interesting to have some of the MCPS people talk about what their plan is for artificial turf. I'm sure that would have been an interesting conversation. We'll try to follow up by email. Anybody else have anything they want to say about the environment before we move on to something which will wake you guys up, which is land use and planning and Thrive? And Liz, do you want to just give us some thoughts over the last couple of weeks, things that have happened that would be of interest to our delegates?
You're on mute.
She knows that, I think. There you go.
Actually, I'm totally unprepared, except I want to let everybody know that there were supposed to be work sessions next month, and they have been scheduled for this week. And so everybody needs to tune into the council work sessions on Thrive. And, keep your feelers alert as to what they're saying. Because one of the most important things that's happened in the last week is that the Office of Legal Oversight came out with a study that not a study, a memo that said that they cannot conduct a racial equity, social justice analysis of Thrive because it is so inadequately prepared that it does not even get to the level that they can analyze it. And they're saying, they need to revise it completely. And yet, despite that, and that's a blockbuster development, despite that, the council apparently is trying to hit the accelerator and go forward. So we just need to pay attention and figure out what's going on. And basically, the bottom line is what we've always been saying is that this plan is not ready for prime time, and it needs much further analysis, and it should not pass now. But it's just like we all have to pay attention to all the stuff.
Karen?
Yeah, I think the other interesting thing, I was just looking quickly at two other pieces they have tomorrow, which includes the Silver Spring Master Plan they're working on. And if you scroll back to the section it has on housing, it's very interesting because it talks about the 2021 Thrive Plan and the things that were, the principles that were agreed to in that and so on. I mean, it's totally written as if Thrive had already passed, had already decided these things. It's looking at this, all of these same multiplex developments and everything, very much being written as if this had already been put into effect. So the notion when they come back and keep saying nothing's been decided and nothing's here and we're still looking at these things, the planning department doesn't seem to be getting that message yet.
Anybody else on this particular issue? I think we have a useful and important ally in David Lublin, who's the professor and chairman of the politics department of American University. These issues about racial justice, about lobbying, about open meetings have got a lot more attention across the community because of articles that he's written in Seventh State. So we are glad we have him as a ally. Carrie, you have a question or a comment?
Well, I just wanted to ask people to be careful. It looks like the supporters of Thrive are trying to now suggest, and they may be correct, I don't know, that the racial equity, social justice law does not apply to general plans. Albanese asked for it. He requested to have this report, and I think that's great. And we need to show our support for, Gabe Albanese to pursue it, because I think the council is going to try to dance around, racial equity. They don't want to deal with it. All they want to do is pass Thrive. They want the housing elements. So we've got to give them some support, give them some cover. We've got to do whatever it takes to make this happen. But Liz is right. Everything we've been saying all along, from the fiscal impact study to racial equity to the cost of housing, cost of these new plexes, it's not ready for prime time. And I mean, you just heard $60,000 a year starting salary for teachers, $700,000 condo. I don't know. They don't seem to jive together as far as I can see.
Thank you, Carrie. Harriet?
Yeah, two things, one on this and another topic on land use. So the work session is scheduled for tomorrow. It looks like it's only an hour, so it's possible they may send this back based on the recommendation of OLO in their report, because I think it's interesting that they moved up the work session, but it's only an hour, and it's at the same time that they're going to discuss this racial equity memo. So that's just a thought. My second comment is I've been receiving a number of requests from various civic groups and people that they would like to request that the council fund the Office of People's Counsel in the coming budget. Has been unfunded since 2010. And I think, Carrie can speak more to this because he was around when the Civic Fed was instrumental in getting the Office of People's Counsel, but they are supposed to, the purpose of the office is protect the public interest and promote a full and fair presentation of relevant issues in administrative proceedings in order to achieve balanced records upon which sound land use decisions can be made. And I think that we would not be in this position right now with Thrive and all these other ZTAs that bypass master plans, if that office was filled. So I know people have been writing to the council asking for this, and I think it would be good if the Civic Fed once again asked for them to reestablish the funding for that office, which is in the county code. It's a position that is required under the legislative branch, but obviously they don't have to fund it if they don't want to. So
I couldn't agree with you more. I saw the email that Max Bronstein sent to Council President Albornoz,
oh, good.
making those points. And I think if we could work and advocate for reestablishing that office as a going concern, that would be a great gift to the people of Montgomery County. So high priority for us. And I'll be meeting with the county executive tomorrow in a different context, and I'll put that on our to-do list. Paul Jarniski, do you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment. So you mentioned, Alan, at the beginning of the meeting that Carolyn Thompson responded to the ethics letter that you sent to the state and suggested a meeting. Do you know when that do you know when that's going to happen? Are you going to invite a couple of the other officers to go? I think it would be good to continue to keep that line of complaint open.
So we have not set a date for that meeting. We have not got back to her yet because we hadn't reached a consensus among ourselves. But at a minimum, it would be our executive committee, and to the extent that other presidents of organizations want to participate, we would try to facilitate that. So we have two meetings, one with ethics and the other one is with the Open Meetings Board. And so it takes a while to sort of pull that together. And then we have to pull together the meeting with the Office of the Comptroller. So, we have some administrative lifting to do, but we have not forgotten. And I was just reminded this, I guess this morning, either by Karen or Jackie, that we can't, it was Karen, that we just can't leave that on the table. We need to follow up. So we look like we're serious. Carrie, you have another comment?
Yeah, that was basically my point. Thanks.
Yep, okay.
I'm just piggybacking on what Paul just said. Is that Carolyn Thompson or Catherine Thompson of the state ethics?
It's Catherine. It's Catherine.
Catherine. I've been dealing with Catherine for the past, several months. The big issue that we've got to deal with is that the Park and Planning Commission cannot be self-policing with respect to ethics. That's just absurd. To have Casey Anderson decide what is ethical, what is not ethical, and when someone breaches ethical propriety, guess what? He decides what the consequences are. The state law indicated, or according to Catherine, is that they're supposed to abide by state ethics standards. Catherine told me she doesn't really know what standards they're applying. They're going to be sending over to her a list of what they consider ethical or not. That's absurd. A quasi-state agency should be adhering to state ethics, standards, should be governed by the state ethics board, and the state should be the one deciding whether anyone with one of these quasi-state agencies is committing an ethical violation. You've got the fox, right, guarding the chicken coop, and he's munching on him as he goes.
Carrie, I don't think anybody disagrees with you. And we will follow up with her. Ultimately, there may be something that the state delegation has to do by legislation. So. And so, Paul, do you have another question? I see your hand is still raised. Okay.
I'll fix it.
Hey, so I'll just add that the points that everyone has made about this point to us having a resolution in the next newsletter. And while Gabe Albornoz's letter did a great job of summarizing where the planning board and Casey Anderson have acted unethically, it was kind of a tiny little slap on the wrist in terms of what they expect to occur because of these activities. They kind of just gave them a little push off and said, bad boy, hopefully you don't do it again.
Well, it did end up in the Washington Post, so it has that kind of significance. I think all the work that people have been doing outside, writing letters, sending emails to the county councils, what prompted, that's what he said in the first sentence, that's what, it's the public's concern that prompted the letter from the council president to the planning board chair. And so we agree with you, and so it's just another thing we have to follow up on. Harry just posted something that I think was significant. Yeah, so we'll do something on the Office of People's Counsel for the next newsletter. Bailey, if there's anything that you would like to write and draft for us to send forward, we'd be glad to follow up on that. So we just need some help with the drafting.
I appreciate you offering me to do that, but I am not the most knowledgeable person on this subject to take that on.
I think they're separate subjects. I'm happy to draft a letter on the funding for the OPC, which we, consistently advocate for. I'm not sure how to integrate those other things in that Bailey's talking about, which I think are a little bit separate.
No, they're absolutely separate. So OPC is one distinct product, and what Bailey's talking about was the gist of Albornoz, which is how you pronounce it, Albornoz's letter to the planning board chair. So those are two different subjects. The OPC is the one that's got the highest priority, because I think we've shined a pretty bright spotlight on the planning board's practices, and we will be following up with both the open boards staff and the state ethics staff. Liz Joyce, do you have your finger?
I just wanted to pile on to what Carrie said about how incredibly important it is for us to follow through, because this is a big deal. And we have been very careful and strategic about our responses, but we need to keep the pressure on, because this is of importance not only to us, but to the entire county. And this is an opportunity to put ourselves out in front on a really important issue that is important to everybody.
I agree with you 100%, and we're all in favor of pushing this ball down the road. We just need, or kicking the can down the road. We don't know. We don't want to kick the can down the road. We want to.
Alan, I think you just need to send a doodle poll around for a few potential times for meetings, because that's what Catherine asked us for, was what would be some times we'd want to, meet. And I said I'd have to get back with the board. It came to me just because I sent them the letter. So.
That's on a different subject. I was just talking about if we want to send a letter about the Office of the People's Counsel, we want to raise the temperature around the lobbying and the public meetings. Those require written products, and so we need help in drafting those things, because.
Well, I thought we'd already drafted the resolution that went to the Attorney General and everything. I thought that raised most of those issues.
Well, I'm just saying, if somebody wants to do something else, they need to sort of draft something and present it to us for our consideration. Jerry, you have a comment?
I can draft the OPC letter, and it really should go out as soon as possible, because the budget is being formulated and will be submitted on March 15th. So we need to get that into the executive so that he can also make the request to the council. It is a office that's under the legislative branch, but we can start the ball rolling with the executive.
No, I agree 100%. So the sooner the better.
Yeah, can we take a vote at this meeting that we're authorizing Harriet to do that, and that we'll agree that we'll review the letter language, but that we're agreeing that it should be sent? Can we do that now?
Do we want to entertain a motion that we send a letter to the county executive calling for the refunding of the Office of People's Counsel? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes.
That's why I raised my hand to make the motion that we just send a letter requesting the refunding of the People's Counsel.
It's been It's been moved. Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion beyond that?
I think time is of essence.
All hearing, seeing no other discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions?
I
Okay,
will abstain, Alan, on behalf of North Woodside.
all right, one abstention, Northwood side.
One more thing.
I'm stunned, Amy. But I understand.
Don't be a wimp.
One more
Carrie,
thing.
are you raising your hand again, or is that still
one
up?
more thing. Catherine Thompson indicated to me that she would like the public's help with respect to collecting evidence of appearances of unethical or inappropriate behavior. I've been collecting for the past couple of months screenshots, and when I send them to her, I'm going to send her a batch of screenshots. When our planning board, our chair,
Hey, Carrie, let's involve you in that conversation as we go forward with that, and let's not talk about that now.
Well, in any event, I think that all of us should be looking out. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have anything on land use and planning that they would like to talk about?
The only thing I would throw in is, I don't think it's just an hour tomorrow. It looks to me like they've got a 3-hour segment for those 3 or 4 pieces. I mean, they're not gonna have a whole lot of time on any of them, but I don't think it's just gonna be a pro forma sort of, hey, we got this thing and we're gonna look at it kind of discussion. Looks like they've got time to have some substantive discussion there.
Yeah, my takeaway from the stuff that's happened over the last 2 or 3 weeks is that they are not rushing to pass this document at this point. I think they've been called out by David Lublin. They've been called out by the hundreds of letters and emails that they've gotten at the county council that they would pass this at their peril. So I think they're going to be a little more circumspect about how they move forward, and that what was it? Is it racial equity and social justice analysis? I think that slows it down pretty substantially, because one of the main recommendations was more outreach and more conversations with communities of color, underserved communities. So I think that's what's going to happen with that. I could be wrong, but I think that's what's going to happen. Anything else on land use and planning?
I was just going to add that I think the only thing they will discuss tomorrow is pretty much the racial equity memo, because there's usually, if they're going to do a full work session, there's a long memo with all the details and stuff like that, and there really isn't after that. So they're taking up 2 other master plans right before that. I think each will take at least 45 minutes. So I'm just suggesting that a big work session on Thrive is not going to happen tomorrow. It's going to be about that memo.
I agree with Harriet on that. Okay, let's move on, and I'm going to bring our meeting to a close. Legislation. We had a pretty robust discussion of legislation to support in the February newsletter. Thank you, Peggy, who I think is in Puerto Rico now. No, she's in Ecuador and Peru, going to the Galapagos and to Machu Picchu. So we're thinking about you, Peggy. And I know that Jerry and Peggy have both testified on behalf of the Civic Federation on issues. Jerry, what was the most recent thing that you talked about?
Well, I didn't have full approval from the Civic Fed, so I've been discussing the various things that they've been bringing up. And as part of my transportation thing, I'm officially not speaking on behalf of the Civic Federation because I haven't been fully authorized to speak. But tomorrow I've signed up on behalf of Seven Lock Civic Association, which I'm president of. And it's on the basically, what do they want to fund with the ongoing toll revenues from phase 1 and of south and phase 1 north of 270. And my prepared statement that I haven't 100% that we're going to ask, instead of funding BRT and other stupid projects like that, I'd be asking for them to fund free ride-on bus service and free Ramada bus service in the county, which would be a lot less expensive than their proposals for funding a BRT route, which actually makes no sense in light of COVID-19.
Thank you, Jerry. Just for your information, people on the call. So last Friday afternoon, I happened to stumble on a Zoom conference. It was a hearing of the Maryland House of Delegates Appropriations Committee Subcommittee on Transportation Environment, which is chaired by Mark Corman. And it was a update on the Purple Line with people from Montgomery DOT and from State Department of Transportation. And Corman was fantastic. You talk about holding people's feet to the fire. I will send around a link to that YouTube recording of that. I've been doing this kind of work for, I don't know, 40 years now, maybe 50 years. That's how old I am. I've never seen anybody as prepared and as thoughtful and as hard hitting as Mark Corman was in that update on the Purple Line. One of the things he pointed out was that most of the people who are working on the Purple Line now were not working on it 3 years ago, 4 years ago. So there's no institutional memory. They're still talking about another 4.5 years to completion. They're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars more in expenses. They're talking about problems they've had in the Bethesda elevator, about the trail, about paving on Wayne Avenue and East Silver Spring. So there are a lot of issues, and it doesn't look like the DOT team is really up to the task to really manage this. They're looking for a contractor to come on in the spring to try to solve some of these issues, but I've got my doubts about that. But Mark Corman was really brilliant, and we're really lucky to have him representing some of us, District 16 in the State Assembly. Just FYI on that, really useful stuff. Our next committee, Public Finance. Anybody? Public Safety? We touched on that issue during education, during the conversation with the MCPS people. There's a large outstanding issue about school resource officers and community engagement officers. I listened really for the first time to a Board of Education meeting last week on Zoom. Very high level discussion. And the Board of Education staffers, they talk in the special education language, which is why mindfulness and restorative justice sort of popped up and nobody knew what they were talking about. But they're trying to come up with a new strategy to have a closer relationship with police officers in schools. The principals want them. Many parents want them. But they're members of the county council. Some of them want them, but there are others who don't. And so it's a very controversial issue that I don't know if they're going to sort out anytime soon. Harriet Quinn, do you have a comment?
Yes, sorry, I missed the slot about public finance. If I could just ask, are we doing a budget meeting this year? I couldn't remember what the schedule is because it's a CIP year also.
Yeah, we are having our
The April 14th. This is Jerry Larson. The April 14th thing, I've had Rich Madalino agree to basically attend unless there's some type of conflict, and then he'll provide someone else for the budget session on April 14th.
So the answer is yes.
Okay, great. Thanks.
So public safety, community engagement officers, and pedestrian safety, just over the course of the last couple of weeks, there was one day in Montgomery County when 3 people were killed struck by vehicles. And just this past weekend, there was a memorial service for a man, I believe, and he was the 3rd person to die at this particular intersection. So the attention that we've given to public to pedestrian safety is really needed and important. Transportation.
One more thing on pedestrian safety. Every weekend, one of the main thoroughfares in our neighborhood is closed for 3 days because Beach Drive. I take it back. Every weekend from Friday to Sunday, Beach Drive is closed. It parallels one of the major thoroughfares in our neighborhood. So that major thoroughfare in our neighborhood becomes the highway that everybody uses to cut through because they have Beach Drive no longer at their access. How do we get MCPS, not MCP, yeah, MCPS is part of this, county police is part of it, and park police are part of it. So how do we get the three of them to acknowledge that they have created a situation in our neighborhood that's dangerous for kids because we have people running stop signs and speeding as if there is no residential neighborhood in their viewfinder? It's really astounding.
Well, we can write a letter. It's not, that's pretty much the coin of the realm, is to send an email to the council president and county DOT and the county executive. The county executive was just up county this past weekend with a group of 45, 50 neighbors out in the street because a dog had been killed. Somebody, it's not funny. Somebody was walking along the street with their dog on a leash, and a car went over the curb and killed the dog. And so the people up there, I can't remember the name of the community offhand, they brought out the county executive, the District 15 delegation, and some other people to talk about pedestrian safety in an interior road. It wasn't a big arterial. So it's Evan Glass had a pedestrian safety summit, I believe that was outdoor this past Saturday.
Yeah, I was there.
So, there's still a lot of things going on. People are getting killed. The state highway is not doing quickly enough to sort of try to deal with to re-engineer these intersections. The police are not really doing enforcement about speeding cars, so it's still an issue. And
well, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was to say, as to the Beach Drive issue, they really did create a huge problem when they started the work. And the work that's already started, the detours that went into place, and the work that's planned in diverting into these neighborhoods, et cetera, and they did not put any very good signage. They didn't take into account for the overflows of traffic, the amount of traffic going through these neighborhoods, and the safety issues that the pedestrians are having in these neighborhoods. So that really should be brought up, that the planning on Beach Drive and the diversion was very poorly planned.
So Josh, where are you talking about in particular?
So Beach Drive from Connecticut towards where the Mormon Temple is now is closed. And diverting off into the neighborhoods, I can't remember the name of the neighborhood, that runs up from Connecticut to the Safeway on Connecticut.
Yep.
That section of Beach Drive is closed now. They're revamping that whole street intersection, and they blocked it off, I think, for 3 years.
And that's not what you were talking about, Bailey?
No, I think what Josh was talking about is Byford Rock Creek Highlands.
Yeah.
But they do all kinds of goofy stuff. Like when they put in bike lanes, they don't even consult with the neighborhoods where the bike lanes are being placed to figure out the best approach, so on and so forth. So I'll put something together to address the issue in our neighborhood, and I'll share it with others. I guess the goal being, if they really want to have safe streets and they really believe in pedestrian safety, when they shunt all this traffic to residential neighborhoods, they ought to be willing to do something to help us make sure that the people don't abuse where they're now driving. And that's what's happening.
Josh, anything?
No, I want to, emphasize exactly what Bailey's saying, is that, yeah, they do that for Beach all the time, where they push it off for pedestrian ride weekends, but the planning going now through the construction is horrible.
Yeah, so a lot of that is the Parks Department.
Yeah.
That comes under Casey Anderson and the Planning Board. So we'll keep our fingers crossed, but we'll raise the issue with the Department of Transportation because they're involved in this as well.
Well, is it still
but-
parks when they push it off of, when they push it out of the park? Is it still parks?
No, then it's DOT.
Yeah,
So,
and that's what's happening once it's left the park. It's almost like DOT and parks didn't talk because they put a
They
big
don't.
detour sign up and then they dump them into these neighborhoods without speed regulation, without pedestrian safety considerations, without an exit to the detour. They just dump all this Beach Drive rush hour traffic into the neighborhood.
No, you put your finger on it. They don't talk, and it's not just, parks and park roads and DOT, it's also Washington Gas and WSSC and Pepco. There's not very much communication or between, state DOT and MDOT. So there's lots of those issues we've been struggling with those for decades.
Yeah,
So
you're probably not going to get any sort of a response about it because we were told once when we complained about the cut through traffic coming, because we're right near Four Corners and a lot of cars come through our neighborhood to save some time. And they actually wanted that to happen because it takes the traffic off the main arteries. So
Well,
they're not concerned with
that's
that.
crazy. That's crazy talk.
That's what we were told.
I know that's crazy talk.
Well, that's what the problem is with the whole planning. I mean, right now, they say if we have the BRT, we will push the traffic onto 270. 270's plan is to reduce the number of lanes. Basically, all but 3 hours of the day, we're going to lose the HOV lanes on weekdays and 24 hours on weekends. And they're saying, well, they're going to push the traffic to 355. Each one doesn't think about, oh, have you checked? Is there capacity on the other road? And the whole 270, I-270 project is actually going to reduce the number of lanes available. And therefore, it's going to divert traffic to 355 and onto Seven Locks Road and every other road. And no one really cares about Vision Zero because their idea is how can we divert traffic off the main roads onto the side streets? That's the goal, and make it miserable enough that everyone will start using mass transit. That's what their goal is. They don't understand
So
traffic
Jerry,
works.
so Jerry, most of us don't agree with that assessment you just made, but we appreciate your point of view about that. I was surprised.
Well, I said it publicly on 355. They want to divert the traffic onto 270.
I understand. I understand, Jerry. So just curious, you said that your Regency Estates, are you also seven locks?
Yeah, I'm the president of Seven Locks, which is an umbrella group of the civic associations on the Seven Locks thing. We have a large amount of traffic every day that's diverted off of 270 and off of 495 because there's not enough capacity. We've been fighting with them for sidewalks for, I think, the last 20 years or so. And it is a project in the CIP, but it's never funded. And because of all this traffic, we try to get sidewalks on parts of the street that don't have sidewalks, and they've just refused to fund the project.
Okay,
They don't really care about pedestrian safety whatsoever at the Montgomery County Department of Transportation.
All right, so a lot of us don't agree with you about that, and so we can continue the conversation later. Liz, you've got a hand up. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I am totally uninformed about all this stuff. But one thing I would say from my pinhole observations is that there is no coordination about the bicycle priorities versus everything else. And there's little coordination and communication about that. And even though I'm a bicyclist, I cannot understand what the big plan is and what the communication is. And I think one thing we can ask for is what's the big 411 and what can we do to understand it and have input into it? Because I don't think there's been any communication about the new initiatives and which have already been put in place and what everybody else is hoping. And I think we can just ask some good questions about that because it is
Well, we'd have to ask questions of people in the planning department because they've got their pedestrian master plan, they've got their bicycle master plan, they've got their transit master plan. And maybe, there's not a lot of coordinations, like probably siloed over there in the planning department.
Yeah. And what do we all have to say about it before they put it in place? I mean, really, this is our big issue. What do you have to say about all these things before they set them in stone? And that's what one of the things we're all thinking about. And it doesn't mean we're on one side or the other. We just want to say, what's the communication plan?
Okay, people hang on for another few minutes. Ira Unger, do you have a question or a comment?
Yeah,
Ira, you've got.
I'm sorry, let me turn off one of my feeds here. I attended a meeting with the bicycle group, WABA, over the last week, and I can try to make a little report of what they're trying to do. One of the things that they wanted to up their budget. They have, I think, several $100 million for bicycle plan over the next 6 years, and they wanted to raise it about 18%, another 100 million or so, to focus on equity projects for bike paths in communities where there are poor people and people of color. So that was their most recent plan. But I can prepare something more organized for the group for next month.
Yeah, because you've been at ground zero.
I can't hear you now. Gee, hold on, I'm sorry.
Ira, can you hear me? Ira? Yeah, two. Ira,
I'm sorry, Alan, I had you muted by mistake. What did you say something?
No, I just saying you've been at ground zero with the University Boulevard bike lanes and the
right
stuff about Arcola. So you do have a perspective on WABA and some of the things that they in the county want to do. So
and SHA, and we had a terrible public meeting with SHA about that.
Right,
but that's another story.
And they did concede that they need to do much better communication with neighborhoods.
Right, and at the time they were conceding it, they had a public meeting that didn't allow people to talk to them or see them,
Yeah,
or see us. So it was, hypocritical on its face.
That's the problem. Jerry, do you want to add anything to a transportation report?
Yeah, if anyone wants to watch the meeting tomorrow night, it's at 7:30 p.m. It'll be on TV and it'll be on the county council's website. And that if anyone wants to watch the meeting on I-270, but we're seeing that each one is pushing to go the other way. It's just amazing how the two can't work together.
So, and the note that Harriet sent around earlier today, she said that the 270 corridor briefing was going to be in the afternoon and not in the evening.
The public hearing is in the evening, the briefing is in the afternoon. Two different meetings.
Yeah, thank you so much for that clarification. So that's it. Did we leave out a committee? Education, environment, land use and planning, legislation, public finance, public safety and transportation. Seems like something's missing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I thought we had 8. But that's all we have for committee reports. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to add for the benefit of the people remaining on the call? Hey, Pete. Anybody else have anything they'd like to say?
Oh, I do.
Oh, go ahead, Pat Tyson.
Yes, well, tomorrow night, SSTC has invited the neighbors of Littonsville to talk about this treasured community. So we're inviting former residents who lived here to talk about their experiences growing up here, because all of our parents and grandparents have passed on. So we'll talk about what the community meant to us, and then the new people that have moved in, we're hoping that they will speak up and say what they found valuable about the neighborhood itself. So we were historically a Black neighborhood, and now we're an international neighborhood. So I know you're all going to be watching various things that have been mentioned, but we'll be on from 7 to 9. And it's the link to it is in the SS Silver Spring, town.
SSTCI, Silver Spring Town Center.
Yeah, right, Town Center is in the February.
So it's a part of the Silver Spring Town Center's Black History Month observance.
Yes.
Last
okay,
week, they
yes.
had a presentation on the civil rights tour that Montgomery County organizes down south. Anybody have anything else? I just have a couple of things. I have one more thing, and then we can go. So there's the Montgomery County Volunteer Center is accepting nominations for the 2022 Montgomery Serves Awards. Deadlines are Friday, March 11th. They offer an award for Volunteer of the Year, Youth Volunteer of the Year, and Volunteer Group of the Year, Business Volunteer of the Year, and the Neil Potter Path of Achievement Award. So you can Google Montgomery County Volunteer Center and check out the requirements. And if you have anybody that you would like to nominate from our community, the civic community, be most welcome. Anybody else have anything else for the good of the order?
You forgot the Utilities Committee.
And I forgot the Utilities Committee. Anybody have a report for the Utilities Committee?
Price of natural gas is going up due to the Ukraine situation.
And so is the price of the cost of water in Montgomery County as WSSC raises its fees. So thank you, Jackie, for reminding us about that. So if there is nothing else, entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second. Okay, everybody, thank you so much. We'll see you next month. So next month, it's our County Executive Forum. So we're pleased to announce that we will have the County Executive Mark Elrich, candidate David Blair, and candidate Tom Hucker joining us. Councilmember Reamer has declined. So we'll have 3 of the candidates for County Executive at our next meeting, and we'll work on an interesting format for that presentation. So tell your friends, and we hope to see you in March. Take care.
Helen.